and Vrindavan is his home, and Mayapur is his place of worship. So, office, Bombay. Prabhupada, we know from the book that Giriraj Swami just put out, big fight. It was a good fight, and Prabhupada won. But we were with Prabhupada first here from 1974. Srila Prabhupada had come here to have the grand opening in 1974, Janmashtami. And our temple president at that time was Guru Das. And he was so afraid to displease Srila Prabhupada that the temple might not be ready, that he kept assuring Prabhupada that yes, yes, you come, everything will be ready for you in Janmashtami. And then when Prabhupada arrived and walked in the gate, he saw that the temple wasn't even 50% ready. And he was in shock. He said, how can we open the temple like this? The doors weren't on the altar yet. The floor wasn't even laid yet in the Darsham Mandap. And Prabhupada was in a terrible fix. He had invited so many devotees, God brothers, dignitaries from all over the world to come for the grand opening. And it was not possible to open the temple. The temple wasn't ready yet. So as a reaction to this shock, Prabhupada became deathly ill in 1974. Now, Prabhupada's sister had come also for the grand opening, and she was about 6 years younger than Srila Prabhupada. We called her Pishima, which in Bengali means the father's sister. So she needed someone to assist her, and I had just come from America to help with the grand opening and to serve in Vrindavan. Guru Das had invited us. So they assigned me to take care of Pishima, to serve her. And as a result of that, anytime she wanted to speak to Prabhupada, Prabhupada would never speak with her alone. She would have me come, and it would just be the three of us in the room together. Very intimate. They would discuss so many different things. I couldn't understand anything because they spoke in Bengali. I didn't know Bengali at the time. And she needed someone to cook with her, to cut her vegetables, bring her things. And she didn't know English, and I didn't know Bengali. So everything had to be done by sign language and Hare Krishna. It was the only thing that both of us knew was Hare Krishna. For 3 months, I lived by her side. I slept at the foot of her bed. And I learned everything that could be learned within 3 months about serving Srila Prabhupada, about cooking for Srila Prabhupada, and about how a lady should reside in India, because I was completely new in the country. So those 3 months was very close association with Srila Prabhupada. He was not well due to the shock of the temple not opening. He had to write so many letters saying the temple will not open until Ram Nomi, 8 months later. And also he had to see how the temple is even going to be ready in 8 months. All of you have seen our guest house here at the Krishna Balaram temple. When Srila Prabhupada arrived here a week before Janmashtami, the guest house was a hole in the ground. There was no construction whatsoever. They had just dug the hole. Within 8 months, that entire guest house was built. Can you imagine? 44 rooms, 3 floors. Ground, first, second, and third floor. 8 months. The whole temple, aside from the basic structure, 8 months. The deity kitchen, everything. Not only that, we had no devotees here because it was very, very austere in those days. We didn't have any running water. All we had was a well. Where Prabhupada's Samadhi Museum is now, there was a deep well. And if we needed water, we had to pull the water up ourselves. No electricity, nowhere to live. We had to live outside because there were nothing was built yet. So this was the condition of Vrindavan in 1974, extremely austere, and no devotees wanted to stay here. So when you see how many lordships we have, Srila Prabhupada. Now here, this Murti of Srila Prabhupada that we have at the Krishna Balaram temple, this is the only Murti that Srila Prabhupada personally installed of himself during his lifetime. And this Murti was non-different from Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes after the temple was open, he would be sitting in his room and the Rajbhog offering would be going on. We could hear the bell ringing at 11 o'clock. And Prabhupada would say to his servant, "Go get the plate, I want to eat." And servant would run up to the head pujari, Drupada, say, "Prabhupada wants his plate." And he said, "Well, the service, it's still going on, the offering is still going on, I can't give it to him." He said, "No, Prabhupada wants to eat his plate of prasadam." So they brought the plate right to Srila Prabhupada's room so he could try and see the quality of the bhoga that they were offering. Can you understand the non-difference? Prabhupada didn't have to wait for the offering to be made. He was going to honor the offering himself. So very special murti of Srila Prabhupada here. He also wanted a murti installed of himself at his rooms at the Radha Damodar temple. Have you all gone to those rooms there? Yes. He said that those rooms were the hub of the spiritual universe, because it was at that place, in the courtyard, by Rupa Goswami's Samadhi and Bhajan Kutir, where the 6 Goswamis would meet every morning to hear Srimad Bhagavatam and to discuss the preaching progress of the Krishna consciousness movement 500 years ago. So we had a murti there at Radha Damodar. We had a murti in the temple. Then after Srila Prabhupada disappeared, we put a murti in Prabhupada's house. Then when the Samadhi was completed, 1983, we installed the beautiful murti of Srila Prabhupada in his Samadhi. So here, the consciousness in Vrindavan is Prabhupada consciousness. Everywhere you go, Prabhupada is present. And we try as far as possible to do everything exactly as Prabhupada instructed us for running the temple. Of course, now everything is expanded so much. The Gurukula building, the Gurukul grew out of it. Now they have 60 acres. I don't know if any of you have seen the new Gurukula. Even I haven't gone to see it yet. But they'll be having, our chief minister of UP will be coming to inaugurate the temple, November 5th to 9th. If you're going to be here, you're most welcome to come. So this Vrindavan project is expanding by the orders of Srila Prabhupada. He wanted a Gurukula with 500 students. He didn't want any government curriculum, so that the children from all over the world could come here and be trained as Vaishnavas. He wanted topmost deity worship. He wanted 25 Goswamis to live here. And he only wanted 3 pujaris and 1 cook. So Srila Prabhupada, he wanted that anyone who stayed here in Vrindavan to live like a Goswami. The husbands and the wives were not allowed to live together here. The women had to live separately from the men, even if they were married. And he wanted everyone to come to the standard of Goswami. He wanted retired people to live here so that they wouldn't be engaged in family activities. He said, Mayapur, they can have their families, But Vrindavan, that's for the renunciates. So that's why this is also the only place at that time where we had a huge brahmachari ashram. And the brahmacharis would come here hopefully without any distractions, so that they could live a very peaceful brahmachari life, preaching and serving in the temple. So Prabhupada wanted this temple to be ideal. And therefore, any of us who were brave enough to stay here, we got a lot of personal training from Srila Prabhupada. And the training that I got was for cooking, for taking care of his home, and for the garden. They didn't have anyone to do the gardening, so they assigned me for the garden in the temple. Maybe some of you have seen Srila Prabhupada's garden in his house. So we originally laid all of the stones and we got a sapling, a tree, a baby tree from the Kaliya Kadamba tree, and we planted that. We got a tamal tree, we got a pilu tree, all the different auspicious trees that you know, it's like a paradise in there, very peaceful. And then one disciple built a beautiful fountain. There's a step in the fountain, if you look inside. Sometimes Prabhupada would sit on that step and he would take his bath in the fountain when the weather was nice. And then he would have his massage there in the sunlight. We would polish Prabhupada's. When I came here, Prabhupada he would sit on a wooden plank, and from a plastic bucket with a plastic mug, he would take his shower. I said, no, we can't, Prabhupada can't use plastic buckets like us. So I bought him beautiful brass buckets and made them shine like gold. And whatever money I brought from America, I bought all different types of things to make Prabhupada's house nice. And from here, once Pishima taught me how to cook and how to serve Prabhupada, then from here, we went to Bombay. Because when Prabhupada was sick in 1974, he decided to go to Mayapur and recover, because the weather was nicer there than in Vrindavan. It's very austere here, the weather. Very hot and also very cold. It's not like the beautiful weather of Bombay. So he went there, and then from Mayapur, he sent us to Bombay, because the books had just arrived for the first time, the BBT books. We didn't have any books in India for distribution. So the Bhagavatams and all of the books that were being printed at Dai Nippon and in America, they were on a boat. And that shipment had just arrived in Bombay. So Prabhupada had us come to Bombay to start the BBT library party there. And we went from, we were with Prabhupada in Mayapur, then he sent us to Bombay. He came a few days later, and there, of course, now most of you, maybe you didn't see the old Juhu apartment scheme that we had in Juhu, the old apartment buildings. No, because you're all relatively new devotees. But there used to be apartment buildings, and Prabhupada stayed in one of those apartments. So every night we would go to Prabhupada's room, and he would tell us where to distribute his books in Bombay. He would say, go to this college, go to that college, go see this person. And we would go the next morning. He taught us how to distribute the books. He told us that when you go to the college or the university, you go to the head of the department, any department, philosophy, Sanskrit, whatever it was, history, and you show them the books, and you get a book order from them for the Srimad Bhagavatams. And then you go to the next department, and you show them that book order, and have them make a book order. And in that way, you can, in one university, you can make many, many Srimad Bhagavatam book orders. So this is how Prabhupada taught us how to distribute his books in Bombay. So we would report back to Prabhupada every evening, the place where he sent us, how many sets of books they took, who we met. And I was wondering, how did Prabhupada know Bombay so well? Because we never knew what Prabhupada did before he came to America. We didn't know what his life was. He would only tell us little bits about his childhood sometimes. But actually, Prabhupada spent a lot of time in Bombay. After his business failed in Allahabad, he decided to make a laboratory in Bombay. So he went there with his brother when he was a Grihasta. And do any of you know where Grant Road is? Have you heard of Grant Road? Yes. So Prabhupada was living on Grant Road, and he was setting up a pharmaceutical business there with the doctors, with the different hospitals and clinics. And as he was going to see these different customers, he ran into the Gaudiya Math devotees who had just recently been sent there by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to open up a Gaudiya Math. So Prabhupada had just taken initiation 1 year before from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And when he saw his godbrothers, he realized, I have to help them get a place. At that time, they were on a little place called Proctor Road. Do you know where Proctor Road is? It's probably a very small place in Bombay. So Prabhupada himself arranged for the first Gaudiya Math in Bombay. And he, with the help of two sannyasi godbrothers, he would go to all of his doctor friends. He would introduce the devotees. One of the sannyasis would give a lecture, and the other sannyasi would canvass for donations amongst the audience. And in that way, in just 2 days, they were able to raise 500 rupees, which is compared to like 50,000 rupees in those days. In those days, it was about 6 rupees to $1. So yes, now it's 82 rupees to $1. So the rupee was very strong in those days. We could buy a whole meal for 25 paisa. That's how strong the rupee was. So Srila Prabhupada was very active from his Grihasta days, preaching in Bombay. And as he was living there and traveling, he saw the different sections of Bombay, and he met very influential people. And as you may know, one of the people that he met was Sumati Morarji, who had a beautiful palatial home in Juhu. So he would travel to Juhu to read the Srimad Bhagavatam to Sumati Morarji, because he had asked Sumati Morarji for a donation for printing his books. And she funded one of the volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam printing. And then Prabhupada would read to her, and as he was going to her home, you know where the bus station is in the BEST bus station in Juhu, he would have to walk on the Juhu Road past this 4 acres, is it 4 acres, the Juhu land? How many acres is it? 4 acres of jungle. And whenever he walked past that land, he was thinking this would be the perfect place for a temple. And this is when he got the inspiration to get the Juhu land, when he was going to meet Sumati Morarji to read Srimad Bhagavatam to her. So later, he negotiated and got that land, and that was when the whole Battle of Kurukshetra ensued. And Srila Prabhupada won. So because we were in Bombay with Srila Prabhupada, we got to cook for him, we got to clean his room, and then again we got personal association with Srila Prabhupada. And during that time, it was 1974 still, just now, this was the time that Prabhupada was here. You notice that he completed his Chaitanya Charitamrita in Bombay. He used to spend a lot of time in Bombay because the weather was pleasant and he had to work on the negotiation of the land. So a few days ago, we had Bahulastami. Bahulastami is celebrated as the appearance day of Radhakund and Shamakund. Although the actual appearance day, the Aristasura Leela took place at another time, but it's celebrated because this Bahulavan that Radhakund and Shamakund are located at, Lord Chaitanya visited there, and it was he who identified the two kunds. It was Gauri Kur and Shamkur, something like that the locals called it. And he said, no, this is Radhakund, this is Shamakund. And he sat there at the bank of the two ponds, and later Raghunath Das Goswami developed those ponds into what they are now. So on that day, we were serving Srila Prabhupada in Bombay. And I was missing Vrindavan very much because I was always thinking as soon as the temple is open, I would open up bookshops, I would open up reception room. We had come here for that service to Vrindavan. But the temple wasn't ready yet, so we were out preaching. But on that day, I put on Prabhupada's desk a bottle of Radhakund water that I had saved. And that evening, when we went to report to Srila Prabhupada about the preaching during the day, I asked Srila Prabhupada a question. Because we all know about the sanctity of Radhakund. In those days, we didn't have yet the Upadesh Amrit. So in Upadesh Amrit, which is only 11 slokas, Rupa Goswami gives the entire process of Vachavegam, controlling our tongue, which is the first step in devotional life, by chanting Hare Krishna and taking Krishna Prasadam, all the way up to the supreme perfection of going back to Godhead and living on the banks of Radhakund as one of the eternal maidservants of Srimati Radharani and Krishna. In just 11 slokas, he's able to do that. He was so expert. So we had visited Radhakund and understood the sanctity of the place. And on that day, I asked Srila Prabhupada, I said, Srila Prabhupada, at Radhakund, each of the major temples in Vrindavan have their miniature temples around the parikrama marg. Have you noticed that? There's Gopinath temple, Govindaji temple, Madan Mohan, all the temples have there. Now, the reason they have those temples is because when Aurangzeb came to destroy all the temples here in Vrindavan, the deities were hidden in bullock carts under Busha and secretly taken to Jaipur to be hidden there in the palace of the king. So on the way, they stopped in Radhakund, then they stopped in Kamyavan, and then from Kamyavan is in Rajasthan. Then they went on to Jaipur. So because the deities had stopped in Radhakund, these little temples were built. So I asked Srila Prabhupada that all the major temples in Vrindavan have their miniature temples in Radhakund. Can we also build a miniature Krishna Balaram temple in Radhakund? And Prabhupada said, oh, that's a very good idea. He said, you can have an ashram there. Yes, you can do it any time. And then Prabhupada was silent, and he looked at me, and he said, what will you do there? And I said, we'll preach, because we were book distributors. I said, we'll preach. He said, no. He said, Radhakund is not for preaching. Radhakund is for relishing. So when Srila Prabhupada said that, because we're trained, our very breath is preaching Krishna consciousness. Because when you have something wonderful, you don't want to keep it to yourself. You want to share it with other people. So from the time that we became devotees, as soon as we learned anything, we would preach to others, distributing books, giving classes, just like we're doing now. For 52 years now, I've been doing the same thing. Distributing books, lecturing, no difference. It has nothing to do with time difference or elevation, or the new devotee, old devotee. New devotees and old devotees do the same thing. They try to help others become Krishna conscious. So when Prabhupada said that Radha Kund is not for preaching, Radha Kund is for relishing, so that made a whole new dimension, because there are two different classes of devotees. One is the Goshthianandis, and the other is the Bhajananandis. The Goshthianandis are preachers. They go out, just as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had told Prabhupada, to preach this message of Krishna consciousness in the English language. They go all over the world to fulfill the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of having the Hare Krishna mantra be heard in every town and village. Those are the Goshthianandis. And the Bhajananandis, they are interested in their own personal spiritual perfection. And their philosophy is explained by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. They feel that if I can perfect my spiritual consciousness, my Krishna consciousness, then just like a fragrant flower, the fragrant flower doesn't have to advertise itself. Just the fragrance of the flower automatically attracts the honeybees. So if I perfect my Krishna consciousness and my bhajan, automatically the devotees will be attracted to hear from me. So what they do is, they stay in Vrindavan and they do this nirjan bhajan. They do solitary bhajan for their own spiritual perfection, so that when they become spiritually perfected, then they can help others become spiritually perfected. So their main concern is themselves, that they get spiritual perfection themselves, and then if anyone comes to them, then they can preach to them. Goshanandi is completely at the opposite. Whatever level of Krishna consciousness we're at, we try to share that. Whatever we have, whether we only know one sloka of Bhagavad Gita or we know the whole Bhagavad Gita by heart, it doesn't matter. Because just by a quarter of a sloka of Bhagavad Gita, if you can remember that, then your life can become perfect. So the Goshanandis are just giving, and traveling all over the world to preach. So when Prabhupada said that Radha Kund is for relishing, I realized at that time that I can't live at Radha Kund. I just want to help other people, because we have something so wonderful. We have Krishna consciousness. And the whole world, all of humanity is suffering because they don't know who Krishna is. They don't know who Radharani is. They've never heard of Vrindavan. They don't even know that there's a spiritual world. Everyone thinks that they're their body. So at that moment, I said, okay, I didn't say it out loud, but I realized I don't. So this was a great turning point in my life, because a lot of times devotees, you'll come, and Prabhupada used to be very much opposed to this. They come here and they think, well, I've made it to Vrindavan, now I'll just do whatever I want here and I'll live like the Brijbasis and forget about the temple, forget about preaching, I'll become a Brijbasi, and we never see them again. They go to live at Radha Kund and who knows what they're doing. So Prabhupada, he said, don't be like monkeys jumping over the back of your spiritual master. You know how the monkeys, when they're sitting on a wall, they'll jump over the monkey on the wall. Don't be like a monkey jumping over the back of your spiritual master. If you go prematurely to Radha Kund, it becomes Naraka Kund, just like hell. Because if you're not qualified, what is the qualification? The qualification is the mercy of the spiritual master. If you try to overstep the instructions of your spiritual master, then you can destroy your entire spiritual life. So Srila Prabhupada, because he was so compassionate, he left Vrindavan, he went to Bombay. From Bombay, he went to America. From America, even at an old age, like I'm 72 now, Srila Prabhupada, he was on the boat at the age of 70. From the age of 70 to the age of 81, he was able to open 108 temples and initiate 5,000 devotees all over the world. That's in old age. So who can do that now, even in our youth? To even open one temple, if each one of you opened a temple around the world, that would be a great benefit. But who has that spiritual potency to go out alone, all by yourself, in an unknown place, sit under a tree and start chanting Hare Krishna like Prabhupada did? So he had such courage. And this is all because he took the instruction of his spiritual master very seriously. He knew that this was Lord Chaitanya's desire. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he predicted that there would be a Senapati who would take this Krishna consciousness all over the world. And when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati sent his disciples to Germany and to London, he paid all of their expenses. He was sending 10,000 rupees a month just so that they could establish one little center in London. And it was unsuccessful. They came back with 2 devotees. And they didn't even make the money. It was being sent from India so that they could establish these centers. When they came back, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was looking around at the devotees and he put his glance on Srila Prabhupada. He said, in the future, someone amongst you will be successful in this mission to take Krishna consciousness all over the world. And then very strongly he looked at our Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada, because he took the instruction of his spiritual master so seriously, it became his life and soul. Therefore, we're all sitting here right now. Because none of us would have ever known about Vrindavan had it not been for Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada establishing the temples, particularly the Juhu temple, which is so successful, and all of the other temples around the world. Now that was Prabhupada's phase 1, that he took Krishna consciousness out of India for the first time and established roots around the world. In America, Canada, Europe, Australia, Africa, the Arabian countries even. He sent preachers everywhere. Iran, New Zealand, everywhere you could think of, Prabhupada sent his devotees. So he fulfilled the instruction of his spiritual master. But then Prabhupada, he had a desire. And that was, when he was preaching in India, he had no success whatsoever. No one would join him because they were all looking to the West. I want to become wealthy. I want to go to UK. I want to go to America. I want to even Prabhupada, when he was a young man in college, he was thinking, I want a white wife, and I want a few white children, and we'll all, this is the Indian dream. And even Prabhupada, he had that dream. So he understood the Indian mentality at that time. This is the 50s, 60s. They were looking to the West. They wanted to westernize India because India was very poverty-stricken, having been for hundreds of years under the submission of the Mughals and then the British. They had lost their culture. And the British had indoctrinated them into thinking that West is best. If it's made in the West, it's best. And anything made in India, no good. You look to the West. So this was the mentality in those days in India. So Prabhupada had a plan. And he explained this plan. He said, if you have a tree and you want to cut the tree down, you take a piece of wood from the tree and you add a foreign element, which is the axe head, right? So he wanted to return to India with his foreign disciples. That's the foreign element. And in that way, he wanted to cut down this entire mentality within India and show that now the Westerners, they have embraced your own culture. You understand? So therefore, he brought us white elephants to India to show that we have given up the entire Western, civilization, and we are living the pure Vedic life as in Bhagavad Gita. And then when the Indians saw that the foreigners had adopted their own culture, they became interested. So Prabhupada used his foreign disciples to then conquer all of India. There's no place more successful in preaching than India. The amount of books we distribute, you can't even count how many ISKCON temples there are now. Does anyone know how many ISKCON temples there are in India? There must be over 100 by now, more than the entire world put together. Because Prabhupada, he lit the match, and now it's become a huge, like a forest fire of Krishna consciousness all over India. He was so intelligent how to attract each one of you sitting here, because at some time or other, each one of you must have thought, let me go to the West, get a good job, become wealthy, settle over there, there's nothing here in India. But now you have adopted your very own culture again, and you're happy, right? Is everyone happy chanting Hare Krishna? Yes. So Prabhupada, he took it a step further. Not only did he fulfill the order of his spiritual master, but he fulfilled that dream he had of reestablishing the Vedic culture here in India itself, the motherland of the Vedas. So this is the greatness of Srila Prabhupada. And therefore, if you study his life, like Prabhupada, he gives a little analogy. He says if you want to learn about the government of India, you have to read so many books. But if you become friends with the Prime Minister of India and spend a little bit of time with him, you'll learn about the entire government within a few hours. So he said, if you want to learn about Krishna, well, how do we learn about Krishna? No one can know everything about Krishna. But Krishna explains in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that if you take shelter of him, and if you render service to him and always think of him, then you can know him in full. That's the first sloka of the 7th. The seventh chapter is the beginning of the central portion of Bhagavad Gita that explains devotional service. And the first thing Krishna tells Arjuna is the perfection of yoga. Yoga was explained in the first 6 chapters. And the conclusion is the last verse of the 6th chapter, Yoginam api sarvesham, of all yogis, he who always thinks of me, he is the best yogi. Then from the 7th chapter onwards to the 12th chapter, Krishna begins to explain the process of devotional service and who is qualified to take up that process. And he says, if you want to know me in full, then you have to always think of me. You think of my birth, you think of my activities, you think of my devotees, anything about me. And then you will become perfected and you will be able to go back to the spiritual world. And he explains how to do that in those 6 chapters in the center. So if we want to know about Krishna, we have to find a devotee of Krishna. Krishna's he's not available right now as Arjuna was, speaking directly. But if we take shelter of a devotee of Krishna, such as Arjuna, such as our spiritual master, we can learn everything about Krishna very quickly, We don't have to read the entire Vedas. The conclusion of the Vedas in the Krishna book, the 10th canto, Pariksha Maharaj, he asked Sukadeva Goswami in the 87th chapter, the prayers by the personified Vedas, he said, what is the purpose of all the Vedas, the flowery Vedas, worshipping all the demigods, all the different processes of karma kandya, upasana kandya, jnana kanda? Why do we have so many Vedas? The ultimate conclusion is we study the Vedas to learn about Krishna. And then Pariksha Maharaj, his next question was, if the conclusion of the Vedas is to understand Krishna, then why is it that the devotees of Krishna are poverty-stricken? The devotees of Lord Shiva and Parvati and the different demigods, they have so much material opulence, facility, but the devotees of Krishna, they're all poverty-stricken. They'll have one or two clothes, and they go out begging every day. It's their culture to beg. So Pariksha Maharaj couldn't understand it. Why are the devotees so poor? And then Sukadeva Goswami, he explained that yes, if you want material benefits, then Krishna has arranged. If you want wealth, you worship Lakshmi. If you want good health, you worship the sun god. If you want whatever you want, if you want a nice wife, you worship Uma Devi. If you want a son, you worship Kartikeya. All the demigods are there to fulfill all the material desires in the material world. But Krishna, he is above the three modes of material nature. So long as you have material desires, he has given facility of worship of the different demigods. But when your material desires are finished, then you worship Krishna. And what Krishna does is, he takes everything material away from his devotees, so that they're not attached anymore to the material world. And by the end of this lifetime, they have no more material attachments, no more material desires, and they're ready to re-enter the spiritual world in their eternal loving relationship with Krishna directly. So this is the process explained in the Bhagavad Gita and carried on further in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then finally the perfect example in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya shows us by his own example how he gave up everything, a Brahmin, a mother, a wife, big community, a big scholar, gave it all up, and he showed us how to perfect our Krishna consciousness very simply by chanting Hare Krishna. So we have a living example, or contemporary example, because now Srila Prabhupada has left this world, of Srila Prabhupada's life. How he lived as a student, as a grihasta, as a vanaprastha, finally as a sannyasi, and attained the perfection of life by bringing thousands of people to Krishna consciousness, and then returning back to the spiritual world, or to any other mission that Krishna is sending him on. Because we're eternal. It's not that we attain perfection and then that's it. No, the devotees are always going, preaching. Lord Chaitanya, he brought the entire spiritual world with him. And there are different books. There's the Gaura Ganodesh Deepika. There's the Radha Krishna Ganodesh Deepika. These are written by the different Goswamis and the associates of Lord Chaitanya that explain who's who in the spiritual world. And when Lord Chaitanya came here, who did each of these personalities become? Like, for instance, Bhavananda Roy, who was a great, very wealthy person in Orissa, he had 5 sons. One of them was Ramananda Roy. So Bhavananda Roy was Pandu Maharaj, and his 5 sons were the 5 Pandavas. So in one aspect, Ramananda Roy was Arjun, and that was why there was some conversation between the two of them. So all of these secrets of when Sri Krishna decides out of his own compassion to come here and display his pastimes for our benefit, to attract us to go back to the spiritual world again. All the devotees come with Krishna. So when you become an eternal, again, return to the spiritual world, become an eternal associate of the Supreme Lord, then you'll travel also with the Supreme Lord to preach Krishna consciousness and attract people back to the perfection of life. So this is an eternal, beautiful process. Now in this lifetime, we've all been born into duality, attraction, and repulsion. You see a little child, they can't control their senses, they want something or they hate something. So we learn how to control our emotions and our desires as we grow, hopefully. And then through the yoga process, we learn how to serve the Supreme Lord. So this is our preparatory lifetime. If we use this human form of life, which has taken millions of births and deaths to attain, and don't think that that's all fairy tale. 8,400,000 species we go through to attain the human species of life. In this human form of life, we can choose, we have the intelligence. Do we want to elevate? Do we want to stay where we are? Or do we want to degrade ourselves into the lower species again? That's our choice. So you have to make your decision in this lifetime, which direction you will go. Up, down, or just stay where you are. I'm very happy in my material life right now. I have my family, I have my good job, I've got everything nice. I don't need anything. That's just staying here. But there's no guarantee what your next life will be. Because whatever you're thinking of at the time of death, that's the type of body you're going to attain. So yoga teaches us, trains our mind, so that we're thinking of Krishna at the time of death. And to stay in the association of devotees means at that time of death, the devotees will be chanting Hare Krishna in your ear. Because Maharaj Kulakshetri says, the throat is all clogged up with mucus, we can't see, we can't hear. But the devotees will be chanting very loudly the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, so that you will be able to think of Krishna at the time of death and return to him. So those two things are very important. Internally, we make the choice that yes, I'm going to use this lifetime to perfect my love for Krishna, and I'm going to stay in the association of devotees so that I can always be learning how to serve Krishna better. And I can think of Krishna at the time of death then. So this is the lesson we have to learn by studying Bhagavad Gita. We have to see where we are in this process. Are we still demons that we don't want to serve Krishna? Or have we come to the platform where we know we're suffering, we turn to Krishna to alleviate our suffering, or we have some knowledge, now we voluntarily surrender to Krishna? Where are we on this spectrum of going back to Godhead? And from that place, we have to take the association of devotees, and we have to go progress ourselves in the yoga process so that we perfect our love for Krishna. And this Prabhupada has given us. We have to take the opportunity of associating with the devotees and make our lives perfect. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Hare Krishna. Jai. No questions, and did you all take prasadam yet today? Not yet, so take prasadam early because eclipse this afternoon. Yes, Prabhu. Is there a mic for him? Or you can come up and ask? Okay.
There has been a lot of talk going around about women empowerment.
Women and what?
Empowerment, women empowerment, women's right to work, women's right to wear what they want. So you came from America, very liberal society. So did you ever felt that your rights were suppressed or you were being dominated by men? So could you just share your little experience about that in that front?
No, I never. Because as soon as we think I'm a woman and you're a man, that immediately that's not spiritual consciousness. So I don't see things in that light at all. We're all living entities. We have particular bodies according to our previous karma. And with that body comes a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of ability. And within Krishna consciousness, it makes no difference whatsoever whether you're a man or a woman, because this is a personal journey. It's between you and your guru and Krishna. It has nothing to do with anybody else. Are you serving your spiritual master's instructions? If you are, then you have the opportunity to go back to Godhead. So that has nothing to do with whether I'm a woman or a man. And it has nothing to do with how I dress. I dress like this because in the spiritual world, the ladies wear saris, the men wear dhoti and kurta. You know, so Prabhupada has had us dress like this with tilak, our hair a particular way, our sari a particular way. He trained us to dress like this, to behave like this, because this is the way people live in the spiritual world. It has, and even in the material world, we might be living here, but I might have right now, due to my past karma, a woman's body, but my eternal relationship with Krishna has nothing to do with this particular body that I'm in. I could be a peacock, I could be a tree, I could be a cowherd boy, I could be a gopi. That Prabhupada, our spiritual master tells us. Srila Prabhupada told me, it's very intimate. When you serve your spiritual master, he can give you all knowledge. Who you are, what your service is, everything. Do you understand? So this whole external consciousness of I'm a woman, you're a man, why, it has nothing to do with spiritual life. Okay? Yeah, Hare Krishna. Yes.
And in class or in Bhakti Vriksha, he take points from what he listens, but he can't remember what he had read in Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam. So he should stop reading and give extra time to listening in lecture, or he should read with listening, he should also read Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. He can't remember that. He read, but he can't remember. What should he do?
Well, Lord Chaitanya, when he was traveling, he went to Sri Rangam. And there was one Brahmin sitting there in the Rangaji temple. He was illiterate, but his spiritual master instructed him to read the Bhagavad Gita every day. He couldn't read. So he would sit in front of Rangaji deity, and Srimad Bhagavad Gita would be in front of him, and he would just turn the pages. And the other Brahmins, they would joke with him, they would kid with him. How's your reading today, Swamiji? They all knew he couldn't read, but he was just turning the pages. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw this Brahmin turning the pages, though he couldn't read. And Mahaprabhu asked him, he said, "You're reading the Bhagavad Gita?" And the Brahmin explained, "Well, actually, I can't read, but my spiritual masters told me to read, so I'm just turning the pages every day." And Mahaprabhu said to him, "Yes, I see that, but I also see that you're crying." And the Brahmin said, "Yes, I'm crying because as I'm turning the pages, I'm just remembering Krishna taking the role of the charioteer of his devotee, Arjuna, and how merciful Krishna is to his devotee. And every time I see that picture in my mind, it brings tears to my eyes, how merciful Krishna is." And Mahaprabhu embraced him, and he said, "You are the real reader of the Bhagavad Gita. You have understood Bhagavad Gita properly." So, not all of us have the amount of intelligence to memorize slokas and to be able to speak those slokas very nicely. But if we get the essence by hearing properly, then our spiritual life can also become perfect. Okay? Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. At the back. So,
Where are you?
at the back, Mataji. My hand is raised.
Stand up. Oh, you're really in the back. Okay.
So, Mataji, in a few days, it is Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. And in a few days, it is Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. And we read in Leelamrit that up until the end, Srila Prabhupada was writing his purports. In fact, that Brahma Vimohan...
Speaking his purports.
He was speaking his purports.
Yes.
So, it seems humanly impossible for a person with that much physical ailment to do that. Could you tell us something about those last couple of months, especially in terms of Prabhupada speaking his purports?
Yes. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was the secretary of Srila Prabhupada in that last year of 1977. And he wrote a daily diary called TKG's Diary. And he explained how Srila Prabhupada was continuing the translations as much as he could, both in Bombay and in Vrindavan. Now, in Bombay, of course, Prabhupada always carried his dictaphone with him wherever he went. And he would, he had, well, you can see in Prabhupada's house, he had his spiritual master's volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam with the different tikas of the previous acharyas. So he would look at those Bhagavatams, he would read the tikas. Tikas means commentaries, purports. And from those tikas, Srila Prabhupada would create his own Bhaktivedanta Swami purports to each sloka. So those books went everywhere with Srila Prabhupada. He would carry one volume at a time. And we have one of those books on display in Prabhupada's house. So he would have to be able to read those books in order to write his purports or dictate his purports. So at the very end, October, November, here in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada, he couldn't even move his own body without the help of his servants, even to go from one side to the other. He had become so weak physically. He couldn't hold the books anymore. He couldn't sit up anymore to hold the microphone. So while lying in his bed, in his room here, in his home, one devotee would hold the microphone to his mouth. His devotee named Pradumna, who was a Panditji, he was American, but he had learned Sanskrit and Bengali. He would read from those books to Srila Prabhupada, because he would read it's Sanskrit, but it's in Bengali script, the books. So he would read the sloka, and he would read the word-for-word translations, he would read the tikas, and Prabhupada would listen. He would read it right into Prabhupada's ear. And then Prabhupada, after hearing, he would speak into the microphone held by his disciple, his purports. Now, he was able to complete 10th canto, 13th chapter, while lying here on his bed in Vrindavan. And if you read those purports, because before that, up to the 10th canto, 12th chapter, it was already printed. 10th canto, volume 1, 10th canto, volume 2 was already printed. So this 10th canto, chapter 13, has the most intimate realizations given by Srila Prabhupada just before he returns to the spiritual world. If you read that 13th chapter, you will learn so much about the spiritual world, about Srila Prabhupada's mentality at that time, and about how he culminates his entire life into the perfection of devotion by establishing this Krishna Balaram temple here in Vrindavan. So I would recommend, if you really want to understand how Prabhupada was able to do it, you read that 13th chapter in the 10th canto very carefully. All right? Yes, Prabhu. My mood, yes, well, a devotee, a disciple, always thinks himself a fool in front of the spiritual master. So, because you could say, you know, Srila Prabhupada accepted his first disciples in 1966. And I took initiation in 1970. I had first gotten the Bhagavad Gita in 1969 and then finally took Diksha in 1970. So even in a span of 4 years, I was considered a younger devotee, because most of those devotees were 9, 10 years older than me. I was very young. And Prabhupada had already taught them so many things about how to practice Krishna consciousness. So rather than Prabhupada reteaching to every single disciple, we younger devotees, we would learn from our senior God brothers and God sisters what Prabhupada had taught them about management, about cooking, about deity worship, everything. Because he took the trouble to teach particular devotees things, so we learned from them. Then, because it's not so easy to become a personal servant of Srila Prabhupada. He would only travel with his secretary, a servant, sometimes a cook. Maximum 2 or 3 people he would travel with. So you had to really learn very carefully how to serve Srila Prabhupada if you were going to be in his personal entourage. So what I did was, I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to come to that stage where I would be able to serve Srila Prabhupada. And I had to learn, and I had to work very, very hard, really struggle, give up all desires for material, whatever position, nothing. Just try to serve Prabhupada very, very sincerely. And after 4 years, 4 years after initiation, Prabhupada allowed me to enter into his personal service by learning how to cook from his sister, and then learning how to take care of his house from Jamuna Daivi before she left Vrindavan. So the secret is you learn from your seniors. And those seniors, they will teach you how to serve the spiritual master nicely. And when you've learned nicely, then you can, Srila Prabhupada, out of his mercy, he will start to give you personal instructions. So that's exactly what happened in my life. Once I learned how to cook, then Prabhupada would call me in, he would tell me what he wanted that day, he would tell me different instructions. So that comes by the mercy, not by directly going to the Guru, but learning from your seniors how to serve. And that's the importance of association with devotees. Don't try to, just like, don't try to see Krishna directly, but act in such a way that Krishna wants to see you. So you learn how to serve from your seniors. And then your Guru Maharaj will see that you're doing a very nice service, and then he will bestow his mercy upon you by giving you personal instructions. Okay. Don't try to jump. Yes, Prabhu.
Could you kindly share any fond memories of you, Srila Prabhupada, in Juhu?
Any
Fond memories.
what?
Fond memories.
Oh, fond memories. So many fond memories of Srila Prabhupada.
Radha Rasbihari.
Yes, of course, in Juhu. All right. We were here in Vrindavan, and then Prabhupada had a program in Ahmedabad. This is 1975, just after the grand opening. So we went with Prabhupada to Ahmedabad, to the program. And then Prabhupada, he left after a 5-day program. He came to Bombay, to Juhu, and we followed that night by train. We means my husband and I. So we arrived, we took the train from Ahmedabad, we arrived at like 5 in the morning. And Prabhupada was just going out on his morning walk. And we had just come from the train station. And we got to see Prabhupada, and Prabhupada saw that we had arrived. So when Prabhupada got back from his morning walk, he sent his servant to call me. He said, Prabhupada's calling you, come. So I went up to Prabhupada's room, offered my obeisances, and he said, when did you come? And I said, just this morning, Srila Prabhupada. He said, did you rest? Of course, we didn't rest, but yes, Srila Prabhupada, we rested. He says, all right, now cook for me. So you make rice, dal, chapati, sukta. Right, because this is, I knew, what to make from his sister. I knew how to make sukta, I knew. So my first time in Bombay, I did whatever I could. I got everything together and cooked it and brought it in. You had to be exactly on time with Srila Prabhupada, everything. So he took his meal, and then that night, he left for South Africa, Mauritius and South Africa. And he was away for a month. So we were there for a month, waiting for Prabhupada to come back. And Giriraj, who was the temple president at that time, when I saw Prabhupada's quarters there, it just looked like a barren apartment. I said, please let me make this apartment beautiful for Prabhupada. So in that whole month, I got plants, and I put, just like what we did here in Prabhupada's house here, I made a duplicate there in Prabhupada's apartment, mini style, I got rugs and bolsters and pictures and everything, so beautiful. So when Prabhupada came back after a month, he walks into his apartment and he looks around and he said, oh, it's just like Vrindavan. So I'm busy cooking in the kitchen because he had just arrived, and Prabhupada had his a life-threatening accident in Mauritius at that time. So all the devotees ran in to be with Prabhupada in his room, and he showed them where he was injured on the leg. And while he was in Africa and Mauritius, he picked up a new servant, because he would change servants from time to time. And this new servant, we had never served together, because you have to serve like a team, it's like the captain and the skipper. You really have to work together. The servant, the secretary, the cook. You can't have any personal agenda. It's everything Prabhupada, and you have to cooperate together. So this servant had never worked with me before. We had never served Prabhupada together. So when the servant saw me cooking, he came into the kitchen, he said, well, I'll come in today and I'll teach you how to cook. I said, okay, Prabhu, because I didn't want to, I didn't want to say, I already know how to cook. So he came in that day, and he's teaching me how to cook, and everything was late, because everything has to be exactly on time for Prabhupada. He taught me such time efficiency, you wouldn't believe it. What I used to do from 9 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Prabhupada taught me how to do within 45 minutes using his cooker. So Prabhupada had already trained me how to cook, but I didn't want to hurt this boy's ego, so I let him teach me how to cook. And I brought the plate in late. And Prabhupada says to me, why is everything late? And I said to Prabhupada, well, so-and-so was teaching me how to cook. And Prabhupada he said, neither of you know how to cook. I will come and teach you both. So Prabhupada comes into the kitchen, and he teaches us both how to make chapatis. He shows us how, the way Prabhupada makes chapatis, you wouldn't believe it. So he taught us how to make chapatis his way, and then he said to us, now you make 1 chapati a minute. So he taught us how to do it. So the next day, I bring in Prabhupada's breakfast, and Prabhupada says to me, I have told so-and-so that you already know how to cook. So then he gave up, the servant gave up, because Prabhupada told him, leave her alone, she knows how to cook. But the servant didn't like that I was in the kitchen. He was a brahmachari, and he wanted to do everything by himself. So I had gone, during that month, I had gone to all the emporiums, and in those days, in Bombay, you had the Bihar Emporium. And in Bihar Emporium, they made these beautiful stone katoris, and they had little tops on it. It was like a cook's dream. So I got beautiful plates for Prabhupada made out of stone, all different colored stone, and like 10 different katoris, and I had a night plate, and a day plate, and a lunch plate, and it was just amazing. They were all made out of stone, right? So this servant, he wanted to cook for Prabhupada, right? He didn't want me to cook for Prabhupada. That was the real reason why, So he wanted me out of the kitchen. So I was cooking every day, and things were going along. Suddenly a telegram comes from Delhi that the temple president says, we don't have a pujari. Please send a pujari immediately. Send her. So that night, we leave for Delhi. I didn't even say goodbye to Prabhupada because I knew what was going on, that he wanted to cook and he wanted me out. So Prabhupada came 15 days later to Delhi. I was doing all the puja and everything. So the servant, he comes to me. The first thing he did was, he offers his full dandavats to me. And then he picks up his head. He says, I'm so sorry I sent you away. He said, every day I broke 1 cup. He said, finally, the only cup that was left was the Shukta cup. And I broke that too. Everything is broken. And then he told me what happened. He said, there's a cook and there's a servant. And the cook and the servant, because the servant also wanted to be the cook. I won't mention any names, okay, because they're all here, actually. So the servant, he was massaging Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would take a bath every day, and you'd have to plug in those days, we'd had to use these immersion heaters, So he'd plug in the immersion heater and put it in Prabhupada's bucket, and when he'd plug it in, the water in the kitchen, in the sink, would get electrified, right? So the cook couldn't cook then because he'd get electrocuted every time he touched the water. So he kept telling the servant, don't plug the thing in there. And the servant would intentionally plug the thing in there. So finally, it came to a head one day, and the cook comes running out of the kitchen, and the servant's there, and they have a fist fight right in front of Prabhupada. And the servant is telling, the devotee's telling me what happened. Right? He said, so we have this fist fight, we're beating each other up, and Prabhupada has to separate us. And then he gave them a very important instruction. He said, you should never do a service that causes inconvenience to another devotee. Can you remember that? Never do a service that causes inconvenience to another devotee. So, and then, because he didn't know that I was just cooking, I used to clean the house, and Prabhupada came in one day, you wash the pots. When you wash the pots, you make noise, right? It's natural. You naturally make noise. Well, Prabhupada's bedroom was right next to the kitchen. So he came in one day and he told me, you can't make any noise. So did you ever try to wash pots without making any noise? So I used to have to wash the pots, not making a single pin drop of noise, right next to Srila Prabhupada. So he didn't know that I was cleaning the whole house, washing the pots, and then going to Villa Parla every day to get the best and freshest vegetables for Srila Prabhupada. He thought I was just walking in, cooking, and then leaving. So suddenly, when he sent me away, no one was cleaning the house, no one was washing the pots, nobody was buying the vegetables, right? Nobody was doing it, and he didn't know what to do. So then one day, he forgot to put Prabhupada's towel in the bathroom for Prabhupada's, when he took his bath. And Prabhupada walks out, he didn't have a towel. He says, such big intelligence, but where is my towel? So he really got smashed. So this was the learning experience, one of the many very intimate and very learning experiences I had while serving Srila Prabhupada in Juhu. Okay, it's just one of them. Many more. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mataji, for enlightening us and giving us so many instructions. The way you spoke about the process of Krishna consciousness, that's like the whole essence of the philosophy you gave us in a short time. And thank you for narrating personal and very sweet pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. We are deeply grateful to you. And also for all the austerity that all of you performed, because of which we are reaping the fruits of that. Yes. So we have it very comfortable even in Juhu and in Vrindavan. And that all the credit goes to all of the early disciples of Srila Prabhupada, ultimately to Srila Prabhupada. Yes.
We're just fools.
So let us once again express our gratitude to Mataji by very enthusiastically from the heart chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra once. Thank you very much, Mataji. Srila Prabhupada ki.